And we're back for another episode on how to run your Cardano stake pool on Raspberry Pi. In the previous episode, the episode number 3 I think, we installed Docker. Hopefully it was nice and quick for you, and I really hope you went back on the Docker documentation and read a little bit about that and what containers are and why are important to us. So we're now ready to build our Cardano node. The instructions are extremely simple, I think, but the amount of time that the Raspberry Pi is gonna take to do this is really huge. So I would strongly recommend to do this last thing before you're going to bed, and then wake up hopefully tomorrow morning to fresh new Docker images containing your Cardano node. So without further ado, let's get into the documentation. So let's switch to this view, and you can see here the Cardano staking pool educational project. Links as usual into the description. If you like what you're seeing, consider delegating to my stake pool. A ticker is easy1, and in this way you can support me and my content. There is additionally also a Cardano address if you want to make a donation because you love this. Please do. I would definitely love that. There is also a sponsor button. Go ahead and support me. So without further ado, let's go back into the documentation. Let me just refresh this one to be sure that I'm on the latest version, as I am updating this as I go along. So we are now at step number 4. Build the Cardano node Docker image. There is one thing to say that is really important. Up until a few months ago, we had to build the Cabal project as well. Excuse me. While the Great Haskell compiler was already built for ARM64 architecture. Thank God the Cardano node, the Cabal is also being built now and provided for ARM64 architectures. So that step that was super long by itself, we don't have to do that anymore. But we only have to care about the actual Cardano node. Before stepping into documentation, I just want to show you the command that we will eventually run, that is here in this Cardano node project. As you can see here, there are different Docker files. These are basically this kind of, you can consider them as scripts that have to be run in order to build the node. So I went through the 124.2, this is basically when I launched my stake pool, then 125.1 is actually the one that is currently running, and 26 there are two versions because there is a little difference between ARM and the x86 64 architecture. And then there is the actual script that runs the build, that is this one. So let's just dive into this very quickly. So this is a very simple script. It's going to basically fetch the architecture from the operating system. It's going to set the tag that is currently 126.0. I think by the time we're going to be done, 126.1 will be out. And that's the one that is going to be running in production in a few days. There are a number of improvements. I just want to speak too much about this one. But if you're doing this in a few days, I know that there are lots of people watching these videos right after I release them. But in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to update this project with the version 126.1. So stay tuned as I will update things on Twitter. And I'm not sure I'm going to be doing a video because it's just like a matter of issuing. I'll update the documentation anyway so that you will always be the latest version. And then here I'm just building like a clever tag for our Docker image, and then this is the actual command that needs to be run. So basically this command is Docker build. So we're building a Docker image starting from this description, and the file is basically composed by the node version plus the architecture Docker file. And this is the version of the Great Haskell compiler, and then we're passing the architecture as well because this is going to be used into the actual Docker file. Logs, they will be printed into this file here because once that we detach from the process, Docker build, you can't access the logs into an interactive way. So I need to save them at the moment that the process is started. So we will see in a minute that we will basically detach straight away from the logs, but they will be written in here. So if we want to go and check, we'll check in this place. And then the tricky bit here that needs to be used with the Raspberry Pi is that we need to use up to 60 gig of memory on the Raspberry Pi, otherwise the Raspberry Pi is going to start choking, and then we give infinite memory swap. We have to do this because the build is actually soak up and use much more than 8 gigabytes of memory. In fact, when I was testing this a couple of days ago, the Raspberry Pi was crashing and crashing and crashing. I needed to instruct the Docker build to just swap from the central memory on the disk, and the SSD is of course 120 gig at least, so you have plenty of space to do whatever you want. Let's go now very quickly through the Docker file for the Arc64. So this is a long Docker file, and this is one of the reasons why it takes so long. But the step that takes definitely the longest is this one, where we are actually building the Cardano node. So very quickly going through the Docker file here, we are using this version of Ubuntu 20.04, and we call it builder. We are skipping some crap that was blocking the build in the past. These are all the libraries that have to be installed. So you do realize that there is lots of stuff that needs to be installed on the operating system just to run the Docker image and the compiler. And we will not need these things anymore after all. So this is all space that would have been wasted on the actual operating system layer of the Raspberry Pi if we weren't to use Docker itself. We would have to install the GHC as well, compile and build the libsodium. Well, this is going to be part of the Docker image, but at least it will not be part of our Raspberry Pi. So another thing that we are getting rid and we are keeping just separated. As I said, the Cabal, the version 3.2 wasn't available for ARM architecture, while it is available now, so we don't have to build it. Back in the days I had to build this thing myself, another half night just to do this, and this is the most important thing. As you can see, here is the tag. Currently, this is the latest tag. This is the Cardano node, this is the project, and the tag is just 126. As you can see, it was released 11 days ago. 125.1 is the current live version, and I expect that as soon as the 126.0 passes QA, there will be a new fork that is going to be new tag, 126.1, and that one will be signed by QA and eventually released on the blockchain. So I definitely recommend to go on the latest because there is an issue at the 48 hours past the epoch, at the start of the epoch, where the calculations are basically slowing down the block producer node a lot. So if you have a block around that time, it's very risky because you might end up missing it. So as soon as this one is available, I'm definitely going to update all my nodes. And then basically once the Cardano node is built, as you can see, I start from a fresh new Docker image. It means that half of the crap that we needed earlier on will not even be taken in account. The number of libraries we will need is very little. Just netbase, JQ, and libnum.dev. Then we're gonna copy again the libsodium references, and eventually only copy the Cardano node executables. So the smallest Docker image possible. So now let's just forget about this for a second and let's just go through the documentation. The step is number 4, and here we are. So all that we have to do is, the first step is to check out this project that I am using it now. You should have already checked this one out as part of the step number 2 or 3, I guess. So you should have it already right there. But I'm gonna put this line again in case you need it as a reference. So if you can't remember, we'll see in a minute. So let's go on the Raspberry Pis. So this is the project. I'll do a nice clear for starting from scratch. Exit. Let's see that we are starting from scratch, and I want to do an SSH. Password is always Raspberry, as we set up in the first episode. Actually, second episode. Never mind. And then we go into our home. We check that the Docker is empty. There is nothing running, and we are in our home. So if I list the content of the home, you can see I already have my project out. So if you use this one command here, this is going to give us an error and say fatal destination path already exists. If you don't get this error, having this error is not a big deal. This only tells us the project is already there. If you didn't have the project checked out there and you're doing this now, it means you're checking out straight away the latest version. In case the project is already there, it's really, really important that we're actually working on the latest version of the project. So what we're going to do is the next step. Change into the directory of the project and pull the last changes. As you can see, I had a couple of things outstanding. That's exactly built the Cardano node documentation. Everything else is fine. Good, we've done this one, and now to the most important step. That is the one in which we are going to be actually building the node. The command we have to issue is this one. Once I launch this command, this is gonna print a very small blob of code that is just this one, that is basically the execution of the command. So you can see what is actually run. There shouldn't be anything else. If you see something else, chances are you have an actual error, and so you will have to go and dig into it. At the moment I've done everything that is not generating errors, so I just can't anticipate any error at the moment, but if you see anything, Google it or hit me on Twitter, and I can find to point you in the right direction. So how can we check if something is happening? So the first thing that we can do is docker ps. If you see that there is something happening, so an actual container running, so Docker is funny, whenever you're building something, you're actually launching a container that is actually doing the build. And this is our build container. So you can see that we launched this thing just 40 seconds ago now. If I do it again, it's gonna update and say what's going on. As long as you do docker ps and you have something here, it means that your Pi is like working as mad to build our Docker image. This is gonna take lots forever, so I recommend to just wait 5-10 minutes. If this is still going, I mean, not that it's completed, there isn't an error. I mean, it means that you can go and just go for a walk, go to sleep. I really hope you do this at night, because waking up first thing in the morning, grab a nice coffee and get back to the Pi. But assuming that it's the morning, and like that like 6 hours have gone, I really hope that 6 hours should be enough for the Pi to build all the things. So how are we gonna check if this thing is completed successfully or not? So the first thing is, anyway, you can see I can exit this one, I can go back in, I'll put my password, yes, I'm in, and then I'm gonna be doing docker ps again, and surprise, surprise, this is still going. So fine, you do docker ps, you wake up in the morning, you do docker ps, this thing is still going, it means the Pi is still building, so you can go for a walk. If you can't see this entry, there are two options. The first one is it's completed, the second one is that there is an error. So let's say, let's make an hypothesis that there is an error first. So this one is empty, there is only container ID returned, so we have to go and check the logs. We go in cd_tmp and we issue a list. And here there are the lists, there is the Cardano Node build logs. We can just do a quick tail, Cardano Node build logs, and possibly towards the end you will see an error or something. Now never mind that this one is red, it's actually not an error, it's Git that defaults to standard error, and so all the logs from Git are gonna be in red. So forget about it, it's all good, no worries. So if I do that again, hopefully it's gonna be different. No, it's still the same, still running, it's still running. So the Cardano, the Docker thing is taking its time. We can do -f, capital F, Cardano, blah blah blah, and I'm gonna continue talking while hopefully we will see a new line appearing anytime now. So the build, as I said, is gonna take quite a few hours. The result of this one is going to be a Docker image that will be sitting on the Raspberry Pi, and then with that Docker image, what we will be doing in the next episode is basically download the blockchain, because of course in order to have either a relay node or a block producing node, you will need the full blockchain to be checked out. Actually, in order to create our pool, we will need a Cardano node up and running. So we will start in the next episode working we will start our node in relay node. There we go, next instruction. So this thing is still going. So we will launch the node in relay node, in relay mode. This is gonna give us an option to start to work with to get familiar with a little bit with Docker and with the Cardano node, but in relay mode, so that we can start to see where the blockchain gets downloaded, all the files, how to save them, where are they, how big it is, the blockchain. We will do this with testnet first, because it's going to be like much faster, and also because I will only show you how to do this on testnet, where we have access to test ADA I can provide you lots of money on the testnet so that you can do your own testing. You can delegate to your own pool. You can ensure that your pool is minting. So this is going to be like a really important. So we'll start from testnet first. We will start in relay mode first to download all the blockchain. Once the blockchain is downloaded, we will create the certificate and register our pool. And once the pool is done, we will then restart our pool, this time in block producing mode. And then we're basically done. We're going to have Cardano stake pool running on our Raspberry Pi, and we're gonna be the owner of our own pool. So I'm gonna interrupt the video now, and you'll see me again always as part of this video, but probably tomorrow morning when this thing is gonna be done. So stay tuned, snap of the finger, and it'll be morning time. And we're back. It's morning time, as my daughter would say. And I have really good news. But before jumping on the Raspberry Pi straight away and check the result of the build, let's just recap briefly where we ended up yesterday, just a few minutes ago. So we cloned the project, we ensured that we were on the latest version, that we got the latest changes and updates, and then we ran this command that basically launches the Docker build of our Cardano Node Docker image. So we also said that we can use our Docker PS to see whether or not the process is still ongoing. And then in here is also explained, it also explains how to check if the compilation, so the build, ended up properly. So without further ado, let's go and check what the story is this morning. So there we go. We actually successfully built the Docker image. Here you can see that successfully built, and the tag is Cardano Node, and this is our tag 126.0, and here is the architecture of the build, that is ARC64, that stands for architecture 64-bit of ARM. So I wasn't actually expecting to see this one. The laptop, normal laptop on which I work, I was expecting it to just turn off and lose the connection, while it actually stayed connected throughout the whole build. So I'm a little bit surprised, but it was a nice way of unlocking the screen this morning. So let's now proceed with the instructions. I Ctrl-C so that I can get back to my bash. The first thing that the documentation says to issue Docker PS to see if there is anything running, and there is nothing, so it means that the build was actually completed. Now we don't know whether or not it was in error, so always following the guide, we go on the we issue Docker images, and we can check if there is anything going on, and we can definitely see that our Cardano node has been built. Now, you can also notice that there are another two images here that you know nothing about them. The reality is that these are the so-called intermediate steps or images that are built by Docker as part of the build. So this is absolutely fine. You can actually see that there is a monster 11 gig of intermediate build Docker image, and this is basically the one where you're actually building the Cardano node and importing all the libraries and all the other things. But eventually the actual image is much smaller. It is only much smaller. It's a big thing. Like, it's a little bit smaller. It's 3.1 gig, and this basically is okay. Now, one thing I wanted to show you, yes, how long did it take? So in here I can see the last time that the file was modified is 4 o'clock, 6 minutes past 4 o'clock in the morning. Considering that I launched this thing about 11 o'clock last night, I think the build took around 5 hours. I want to say less than 5 hours or thereabout, because I'm pretty sure I launched this at about 11 o'clock. So, or just after 11, so I'd say about 5 hours. So I think that should be pretty much the same time. It can change and vary a little bit depending on your internet connection, but it's only gonna save like 5 or 6 minutes if your internet connection is much faster than mine. But otherwise you should anyway expect 5 hours of completion time. That is not even that much, because if you consider that we could have required to install Cabal as well, that would have gone definitely around the 10 hours marks. So let's check if we went through the old documentation here. I think we did. Yes, I think we did. So we're basically done for this episode. I just want to remind you that my name is Giovanni. On Twitter you can find me as a CryptoJoe11. I would definitely recommend you to follow me on Twitter, as I give lots of updates, both technical and non-technical. I am also a stake operator, of course, a stake pool operator of Cardano stake pool that runs on Raspberry Pis. The ticker is Easy1. If you like the content, I would really appreciate if you would consider supporting me by delegating to my stake pool. I just want to repeat, the ticker is Easy1. So thank you very much again. I hope you're enjoying this content. Let me know if you have any trouble in the comments below, or by hitting me on Twitter. I'll do my best to reply to everyone. So thank you very much, and I'll see you at the next episode. Bye.